I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, thank you to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, time, and the love and support everyone shares with me from the heart. I appreciate every one of you. Also, do please like, share, subscribe, and hype the video to help the message reach a little bit more. Gracias. One everyone. Getting right into the topic on here, right? I've been asked numerous times to touch on Chino from Norwalk, right? So I said I would, at least my personal crossings with him, right? That that again, that's all I speak on. All them third conversations. One, I can't go sign on them, and it's just hearsay, right? But anyways, you know, I want to take you back. I got almost at the end of 2004. I got to Pelican Bay. So a couple years after that, you know, the time I was up there, just doing different things, right? From directing yards or messages on the streets or whatever, just from numerous of Baileys. I'll be honest with everyone. I had not, I had not heard of Chino from Norwalk. It's like I stated before a long time ago, right? Just because you're in the fold don't mean you're aware of everyone that's there, right? Some are real conservative and quiet on what they're doing, which my belief is what Chino was about, right? Again, as far as I know, he was doing a lot, but most all he was doing it alongside Psycho, and Psycho was mainly the one on blast, right? But anyways, after a couple balas, right, being there, it seemed weird to be honest, because I knew I had you get up there, you have to answer up for whatever you did in the system, right? As responsibilities. And one of them was the issue that happened with Diablo from Norwalk and into Tehachapi. I'm not going to go back and retouch on everything, but more so it had to him getting dealt with and me being responsible because of what he was doing with the youngsters, right? Which is the homies that caught time young, right? 16, 17. They were waiting right there on the 180 to reach 18, and they would eventually get kicked out to the 180. Anyways, he was abusing that in every angle. I already touched on it, and when we got back there to A block, he would answer up before I left to 7 block, right? But anyways, throughout the things I was doing again, I met the homie Güero that I spoke on, right, in Ensenada, and I met him up there. He was short to the house, you know. He was he was doing things, but for some reason he skated through, maybe because he's older, knew the guidelines better than one, right? At least to get around the squat. And anyways, I don't meet him, and one day I just caught this on my peel right from Güero, where the trust was there already, right? And he tells me in so many words, right, that he was addressing a message from Chino, and more so who Chino was, because no disrespect, but again, I didn't know of him, and I never sent my respects up right to him. But again, I think that's the way he liked to work, right, which is respectful. I believe is smart, right? Anyways, he was basically asking me about that issue, right, with Diablo and Tehachapi. And this is just an in look on how politics are, At every angle, there's something there to have it crash. Because from the way that I'm appeal read, I knew right away that was a question, like, not in a positive way. We'll just leave it like that, right? So I put my card up right away, finished reading through it. Basically, he was asking me if he could address me in an appeal directly, and what can a sureño say, right? So I told him, of course, anytime, whenever, I'd be glad you know, to answer what I can answer. And in due time, he reached out and he told me that basically I forgot if it was his prima, sister, I don't know. But anyways, Diablo's brother was with her, right? So it was a weird thing, but somehow, some way, it got back to him to check on it, right? And again, Diablo, due to Tio Chino from Maravilla, he was no good, right? And anyways, right away I felt like it was a push for me to crash, right? I'll be honest, at this time I was barely easing in from what happened in Corcoran and other issues that one feeling, right? Of I got something coming for whatever. Cause politics work differently. I'll just leave it at that, right? And even though I had everything correct for Corcoran, it's still different mentalities. Corcoran and the Pelican Bay. It's just facts, right? And anyways, so I answered, basically explained everything, how he had a young homie crash, a paisano crash, was taking money, canteen dope, X, just stating he was somebody, right, on the 180 when he wasn't. And fear was getting into him, and he was having them crash before they got out to the 180. Because he was, I guess, a porter. He had access to one block in Villa, right? And anyways, we corresponded a couple times, and he was pleased. I'll just say that he was pleased with what had happened. He told me who threw the cuetazo there. I told him I wrote to A Block, to Tio Chino. He could verify if he needed to, and that was left. It was left at that. Mucho gusto. Todo un placer. XX. You guys know the get down. And basically, he said he wanted to do some things with one of his brothers that Weddle was going to be getting at me. To please do know Weddle was speaking in behalf of a couple, right? We'll just leave it at that. And I told him, if I can, con mucho gusto, right? Being that nalgas prontas, right? That in reality you have to be inside. Basically, afterwards, his Weddle addressed me that he was going to get out. He was going to be deported, and he needed to settle in, right? In somewhere in Mexico, and it was that time of conversation where different pipelines needed to be organized, right? It was basically the ones they had wasn't was there, but wasn't, how do I say it, to the extent that was needed in the reach type, right, of material. So I told him, in Baja, I couldn't really say about Ensenada, right, because I have family members there, but some got arrested, some had to move out. The ones that stayed went solos, you know, things like that. Tijua's definitely not, right? It's wild. Rosarito, Tecate, all that area, right? But I told him that there was people out in Ensenada. This is exactly how I stated before. I was part of the poison, right? Again, to stay relevant. It's part of the program in the shoes. Whoever tells you different, you know. Anyways, we worked it out. I had a meet with I'll just say a homeboy of mine from my neighborhood and family, basically just to receive him and have him get settled in. Right, he was going to have the backing of Mike and Rube and Chino and all that would later turn into politicking, right, against Fox and Evil and Tapo. It was basically, it was mainly, Cricket and them and the feds. They were pushing because they were being pushed aside. So, anyways, we helped Güero settle in. Of course, they had feria, so material was there. The rest, it was basically he had to pedal for, right? In the sense of, yeah, we'll help you first, two, but three, four, you have to, stack your queso and start opening them avenues for yourself, right? It's how it works. You're buying it at price in Ensenada, right? It's, you guys know it varies, but Ensenada, there's only, you have to give it in price. You know, for example, if uh if a P of that meth is down in las dos letras, right? 1,300 down in Ensenada, you're getting it for about 354. So and it's just to make sense of it, right? Anyways, he would eventually get settled in, get his little crew, and since he started with who were there in place, everything was cool, right? He was sending up to the feds and to Chino. You know, eventually I went to the feds. Following Sana's direction, I came to Mexico, and I would eventually hit Ensenada and meet up with the homie, right? And is when all that hate was going around, right, or had just passed, and the homie was still meeting a lot with my homie, right? And basically, I addressed him, right, what it was about. You know, if it's none of my business, it's none of my business. Just with all due respect, I felt this. I always been that individual. I don't stay quiet, especially when it comes from camarada to camarada, right? And I felt like I was being cornered into hitting a brick wall with my answers. And I was just curious what angle Chino was taking. And he said, yeah, that's why I say always be smart. And it is why I tell these stories to open up that angle for when things are directed towards you, you're able to see them. And by the time they're coming your way, you're gone and came back around them, right? You're able to see it. I lived it, nobody taught me. It was just, I always had a Raul to question on things, right? But again, those type of questions, like questioning a Billy, it was never going to get out, right? It was amongst us because, a lot of factors could play into that. But basically, he said, yeah, he was pushing for what happened with Diablo happened to me, since I was the one behind it, right? And I told him I like doing my homework, you know, homie. By the time you hit up there, right, like him himself, he had always hit Pelican Bay shoe, but me, I had the walk of hitting all three shoes. I started off in Tehachapi and Corcoran, both yards, to Pelican Bay, both sides. So I pretty much, I'm not gonna say I could see things, but you're able to read into things, you know, palabras, words. That's why I always tell everyone on the lives, you know, even though I probably sound this, and that, I'm a real good judge of a person. Most of all, you don't gotta say a lot. Your own words speak loud to me, at least, right? And basically, I told him what ended up happening. I guess Diablo got out and he was still hanging around his neighborhood. And basically, it's how it happens, right? It always happens like that. Inside, outside, whatever. Either your closest homie. In this case, it was his brother, right? That pressed the issue for him up in the bay. Was assigned to hit Diablo. They didn't want him walking around Norwalk, period. And it shouldn't even have been like that. You see, I was a lifer, okay? You know, nothing got picked up, whatever, but it was dealt with. There was a need for a different push on the streets. The paperwork stated he had gotten hit. Peely stated he was no good. But since every Peely's his own man, and they feel they're the next Peely, they would never agree. That was still Diablo was still allowed to walk around the neighborhood like nothing. So his carnal did it. You know, a lot of people won't agree, but his carnal did it because whatever angle he had with the Peelies, right? At that time, Bobby, Mike, and all the rest of Norwalk had a bunch of Peelies straight up, and he only knew his walk, right? I can't speak on it because I only met Diablo, not his carnal, but he got hit. So there went that loyalty, right? I understand this is brothers, but there's cases camaradas push on camaradas to secure or try to pull him back in, right? Well, at least back then, and it could always backlash like that, right? It could go in your favor, and a Pili minimize the next Pili, right? But you do with a Pili that don't really like to be in drama, he's gonna follow where the chips fall. Again, not all Pilis are bad Pilis, right? But look, one angle, everything I did, he was minimizing, right? For Diablo. And then the next minute, he's crossing up a homie that's been loyal to him to hit his own brother. Catch time, catch life. And there went that avenue that whatever he was doing on the streets for them went. So in reality, where's the value? Where's the love, the respect for what you do? It's a misled. That's why, I always state, be smart. These stories ain't for nothing. I'm not even trying to glorify anything. You might think I'm an idiot, but at the same time, just hear him, just hear him. Believe me, I grew up having things log on to me. So when I seen them present themselves, they either played out in a good way or in a negative way, and I let them go. That's all this is. And yeah, all of my life I've been an idiot. But I would have really appreciated a camarada above me that would have been able to school me. I didn't have it. I didn't even hear camarada speak like this for obvious reasons. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is be true to yourself, loyal to loved ones, to those that count.
This is what we started. We always